Hello to all you wonderful folks. Welcome back to the Chirp, a podcast by Pigeon Loans, where we hear stories of relationships between loved ones being affected and sometimes tested by the lending of money. We love to bring these stories to the forefront of our minds, tell them to the world, and make what is usually an awkward subject more digestible and lighthearted and less taboo. And today is a very, very special guest for story number 12. I had the pleasure of sitting down and interviewing Kaben Clauson. He's the co-founder of Pigeon Loans. He's a captivating character, and as part of the Pigeon Loans team, no one has a deeper insight into money and relationships than Kaben. Now, Pigeon Loans is a platform for friends and family to lend each other money in an easy-to-use, structured way, and the Chirp was created to educate people on the value of sharing these stories about lending in relationships and what is best practice when getting involved in these loans. So a little history lesson there for you into the how and the why the Chirp was created. So here we are. I was delighted to chat to Kaben about him and his co-founder Brian creating Pigeon Loans as a platform, how his own personal experiences over the years led up to this moment, and him leading the charge in making lending commonplace, making it easier for people to lend each other money, and how important this whole movement is for society in general. So really hope you all enjoy this one. I learned a lot. I hope you will too. And let's dive into the conversation with Kaben. Thank you so much for joining me today. Obviously, you know, you're the co-founder of Pigeon Loans, and this is a podcast by Pigeon Loans, and you are the first member of the Pigeon Loans team to come on and chat to me, so I really appreciate that. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Great to be with you.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Well, obviously, very keen to hear about your story up until this point. Obviously, I've done a lot of digging myself, but very eager to ask you a few questions about how you got started, not only as a successful entrepreneur, but as a very talented public speaker as well, which is what struck me most about you. So, these passions and these talents and how they've accumulated. Where did you get started and how did you come to be up until this point?
Well, funny, like many things in life, your family has a profound effect on you. And I grew up in a household where my parents were kind of world travelers and adventurers, and then ultimately they became, public speakers themselves. So I think a lot of this was kind of those mirror neurons in your brain, kind of observing as a kid my parents at, some of these public speaking events they did across the country, particularly in the marriage counseling space. So I was able to see them do that. And frankly, public speaking is terrifying to me, just like it's terrifying to everyone. And I think at some point in my life, I saw that as like a challenge, Cameron. I was like, man, that scares me so much. I'd love to figure out if I could maybe have it scare me a little less. And I started to do some Toastmasters, which is a very famous course in America. A
Yeah,
lot of people love that course. I started diving in and doing that and kind of approaching that fear. And I'm realizing more and more that it's kind of becoming a dying skill, across the world in many ways. So we become more digital. We're having less people that are willing to stand in front of a crowd.
mm,
And I am passionate not only about doing it and improving it as a skill myself, but I'm really passionate about helping other people do the skill, because this is a skill that I think a lot of people have brilliant things to say, not necessarily from a stage. They might have something to say to their boss. They might have something to say to a family member. Just the courage to speak candidly to other people. I think public speaking can give you a lot of the confidence to just speak more confidently in general in your life. So I'm a
yeah,
huge advocate for it. I started a club in Miami called Nova Miami. We're a place where people who are in the tech industry or otherwise, anyone here, can come to a safe place. We can all fail together. We do improv, we do speech review, we give people a chance to give a speech at the end. And it's been really cool to watch good speakers become better speakers. But I think more profound has been I've seen some friends of mine that literally struggle with social anxiety to such a degree that they have a hard time going to a networking event. To see them get up in front of a group of people and do a little improv skit, even for 10 seconds, and you see that deep breath, they go, and afterwards they're like, wow, that wasn't so bad. Like, no one's going to get me, no one's going to mock me. So that's certainly a personal passion of mine.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I think just kind of communication in general is what, I'm a big advocate for myself. And to see someone, I'd say, blossom and be able to come out of their shell and realize all this shit isn't that bad, I'm sure is wonderful to watch. As I said, great to have you on. Specifically because you are the co-founder of Pigeon Loans, and I'm just keen to know, when the idea of the platform was, first put to you, or when you first discovered what the power and what it can do, was there any kind of eureka moments or like a light bulb moment where you're like,
Mhm.
dang, that would have been handy then? Or what kind of instant stories came into your head where you were like, I believe in this?
Yeah, I'm very blessed, and I say blessed, and you might say, "That's funny, why are you saying you're blessed?" I'm very blessed that I grew up in a family that faced some financial hardship throughout my life. Um, it wasn't always it's not the worst story you're gonna hear, of someone in America. In some ways, we're all blessed, but certainly I saw my family go through financial stress around that, around the '08 financial crash,
Hmm.
which was frankly really hard on my family that was doing some real estate investment at the time. I watched my father, man, I deeply respect and admire, be very downtrodden and sad, and in a way, probably feeling like less of a man because he had to go borrow some money at a time from his parents. And that moment always stuck with me because I remember thinking about how important it is that we have people like that willing to back us and help us. Where would we be without those people? But then also the emotional toll it takes to even have that conversation, how
Yeah.
awkward it can be, even with parents, and then how it can create awkwardness as the years go by. And then for me personally, I had this journey after college where I was one of those people that was really lost, and from a career standpoint, I wasn't the really planned out kid who was doing the internships and getting the job and going up. And there was times where I was really struggling. And the biggest time was when I started my first company, first tech startup called True Public back in 2015.
Hmm.
Cameron, I had no, I quit my job. I took all my savings and put it into this prototype of this app, just some crazy idea to get the public opinion of people all across America. And very quickly, I was out of money and I was trying to fundraise. And I was able to get loans from some people that not only kept me in business, as it were, but also kept me believing in myself in a way. Sometimes you just need someone to just believe in you. And
Hmm.
what was kind of profound was these were loans, and these loans, though, meant these people believed in some way I was going to be able to pay them back, that this was going to be a success, that I was eventually going to raise money from real investors and build a company. And we ultimately ended up doing that. And that meant a lot to me. And I think the third story, though, which is kind of interesting, is lately I've been able, to lend money to a few friends. And that has been, and that even happened even before the idea of Pigeon even came to me.
Hmm.
And I thought with those relationships, boy, will this be awkward lending this money? Um, how am I gonna, do I need to text him once a month? Do I need to remind him? Should I pretend like this money's just gone? I wasn't in a place where I could just give someone money. And I think a lot of Americans and people around the world are in a place where they want to be generous, but not everyone can just say, "Here's $500 or $1,000 or any amount, and I never need it back."
Yeah.
A lot of people want to help, but they do need it back. And practically, I had a friend who works in Hollywood. He's an up and coming person. I think he's going to have an incredible career in Hollywood as a producer and a director. But he's kind of in that weird place in life where certain things aren't cashing for him quite yet.
Yeah.
And he met a wonderful young lady recently, and he's like, "Man, I want to go on a great date with her. I've gotten to know her pretty well. I want to go on like a nicer date." And it was such a blessing for me to be able to loan the money for that specific purpose and for
Yeah.
him to just pay me back over the next 6 months. And I think those kind of three stories encapsulate my journey around Pigeon Loans. The one of seeing the anguish of hardship in my family and having to go to family, um, having to personally borrow money to even get a business going, and relying on people's help. And then more recently, feeling kind of that, giving to people isn't always less. Sometimes there's a selfish aspect to it, which is it feels really good to help people.
Yeah.
And I think if Pigeon Loans can enable more people to help each other in the form of loans as opposed to gifts, I think that's going to be a net massive massive boost to society as general and in general. And I think that's something that we really want to drive here with this product.
Yeah, make loans commonplace. And I love what you said there about people want to give, people want to lend, but they just maybe they can't, and to have kind of pigeon loans there to structure everything is fantastic. And I was watching your interview alongside your co-founder Brian with Chris Daniels and the Shrimp Society video on YouTube, and listening to the story of how the platform came about, and Brian and his mother during the pandemic looking to help each other out. And you mentioned shame as a concept that you both had come across, quite
Mm,
frequently. And going back to that story to your dad, and I, I very briefly, but you said it, but obviously you have a huge amount of love and respect for your dad. Is seeing your dad struggle during 2008 and all of that horror, and seeing him, come out of it, and someone you love and respect being kind of downtrodden with debt, has that kind of made you look at debt differently in general, and know that shame doesn't have to be a part of lending, and in kind of that way? Has it kind of taught you to
mm.
realize that people aren't defined by debt and by their financial hardship?
It's funny you say that because I think one of the huge secret hidden pains that's facing millions of people all over the world is they're walking around with a giant weight on their shoulders. I'm imagining like a backpack that's got rocks in it,
Yeah.
and that's their debt. And I've been in some credit card debt before, not a lot, but enough to where it was like it kind of is weighing on your subconscious because deep down inside, you kind of feel like you're, you know, just to be real, I'd almost feel like a net negative on society. When you're a negative, when your capital is literally negative, it can feel that way. It can feel
Yeah.
like, am I valuable? And that to me is one of like the truly heartbreaking things that a lot of people are facing because so many young Americans were really not taught in our upbringing and our schooling a lot of practical financial matters. When I went out and took out my
Mhm.
student loans, Cameron, I had no freaking idea what these interest rates meant, payment periods, what would this mean for my life? I was
Mhm.
thinking it's such a near termism where I was like, I need to go to college. College is a cool place to go. I'll meet fun people. It sounds great. And I think people are doing that again and again. So I think debt is this weight that's weighing on a lot of Americans, certainly. And then you brought up shame, and I think shame is such an important word because I think in some ways this is uniquely, maybe not uniquely American, but certainly an American problem. And the problem is America was built on this immigrant mindset of pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You can go from rags to riches. You can become anybody. You can be Barack Obama and then become president of the United
American
States.
dream.
You can the American dream. You can grow up poor and become rich. And I think whether it's my father, myself, um, certainly stereotypically this is more common in men than women probably, there's this self-sufficiency we all want to have where going to someone to ask them for money, it's, I think, in America often shameful. I think
Mm.
one thing we need to reverse is we need to reverse that. I've even talked to customers of Pigeon in the last couple of weeks who've told me I've taken high interest rate loans that were a bad financial decision because I literally didn't have the courage to let a friend know that I was doing badly. So they took out a loan, which is a way worse financial decision, right? In the payday lending world, it can be a 400% interest rate, which is insane. Um, so reversing that, Cameron, I think is one of the biggest goals of Pigeon. Make going to people who love you, who care for you, the first place you go to look for help, as opposed to the bank or payday lender who they're just trying to make a profit and there's no actual incentive for them to, get you out of debt even necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that the ethos and the mission is to be the first port of call, the first stop that you do instead of going to like
Yep.
an institution or something like that. Because I know from like other financial services that I use. I use Revolut here in Europe, but it's the same as Venmo or Cash App or whatever you'd be using. But I don't like use my Irish bank anymore, and I don't really plan on using it as I move forward. And to know that the only other reason why I would kind of go to a bank is to get a loan or to get a mortgage or something like that, and to know that
Mm,
there are these platform. Well, there's only one really, Pigeon Loans, where that could be your first port of call. So banks are becoming less and less relevant, which some people might say is a wonderful thing. But doing that kind of market research yourself and talking to customers all the time, what are kind of some of the, you touched on them a little bit, but what are kind of some of the behavioral things that you're learning about lenders and lendees, borrowers and lenders? What are kind of some of the behaviors and the psychology around loans that you've noticed? Like, for example, do family members typically give lower interest rates than friends do? Kind of
mhm.
something like that. Have you kind of noticed any weird bits of information?
Yeah, well, we've noticed a lot of interesting things. First of all, one of the cool things about Pigeon Loans is because the lenders on Pigeon aren't coming to Pigeon with a profit mindset. They're typically coming with a more charitable mindset. Because of that mindset, they're not coming in and giving these astronomical interest rates. We're typically seeing interest rates between 1% and 3%. Some are even 5%. Funny tidbit for you though, in some cases, I've had borrowers tell me, I liked paying a 5% interest rate or a 7% interest rate. Why? It allowed them to quote, the quote this one guy gave me was, it allowed me to save face. And I think that goes back to what we just talked about with shame. He actually wanted to pay more interest. So he felt like his friend that was helping him wasn't just doing a charitable thing. He was actually some return to him. That's
Yeah.
been fascinating. The other thing that's been fascinating, lenders and borrowers are very different. Our lenders are typically people that have some more means, they have some more capital. Um, our borrowers are typically people that are younger, under 30, potentially struggling, getting their career going, trying to get a business going, dealing with debt. But what's really unique about our lenders, and I think is potentially profound, many of our lenders were once borrowers. Many of our lender profile is more likely someone who maybe started off with a bit of a struggle. Maybe they grew up lower middle class. Maybe they had low income in their family. Maybe they've experienced this before. Those type of individuals, when they eventually make it as a small business owner or as an engineer or as a marketing executive, they're now much more likely to turn around and lend a helping hand. It's that pay it forward mentality that's so cool. It's
It's
something
like
that
you
certainly
with
is,
your
yeah,
third story, after
yeah.
you getting a loan and then you were able to give back to your friend and let him go out on a big date.
Exactly, and then hopefully he's gonna, sell a couple of big scripts and make some big moves in Hollywood, and then he's gonna turn around and help someone else out. And I think that's kind of like a
Mhm.
virtuous cycle. But yeah, it's been really fun getting to know the borrowers and lenders and hearing all their stories, and the stories really bring it to life. Whether it's someone who's friends, has a wedding photography business. Their camera falls out of their car, it breaks. It's a $6,000 camera. The wedding they have to shoot the following weekend. They're literally about to lose that income from that wedding, which is their rent money, which is the money to pay for their baby. And someone was able to get them that money within 48 hours and get them on a loan and completely change their life. And without Pigeon Loans, that would have been a lot harder conversation for them to have. And there's a real scenario where they might not have gotten that money.
Learning so much about these borrowers and lenders, and obviously I know that you have your plans for the future and things like that. Can you kind of give us a little bit of an idea of, obviously you've gotten huge investment recently. I'd love you to talk to us about that. But also where do you see Pigeon Loans in 5, even in 10 years as well? Like I've talked to another a guest in the past about the kind of the future of loans in general. And he was saying, speed is a huge thing. And I think Pigeon Loans is really tapping into that with, being able to do it everything just one to one. You're not waiting for institutional approval or things like that. But you coming into Pigeon Loans and really, I'm very excited to see what you do. What plans do you want to see come to fruition in the future, near and far?
There's 13 million Americans in our estimates right now, it's just America, it's not worldwide, who currently have a loan out. they've lent money to a friend or family member and it hasn't been paid back. So 13 million Americans are dealing with this from the lending side alone. And in 5 years, it might be a big goal. We want to capture at least one fourth of all of those, right? That right there alone would be a massive business for Pigeon Loans.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be doing a lot of good in the world. Now, some of those loans are smaller, the $100, $200 variety. But for any of those loans that are over $500, $1,000, it makes total sense. We want to make it a no brainer. So, one of our jobs is to get this out into the zeitgeist of America enough and then eventually around the world, where when people think about this type of a transaction, Pigeon just comes into their mind almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think, kind of this, I can maybe tease the future a little bit. We also, though, see that there's this future where a lot of people are going into these payday lenders. They're
Yeah.
they're typically a $375 loan, very small amount. $375 is the average payday loan. The average term is a week. It's just a week turnaround. And the interest rate on those is often 400%. And then there's
Wow.
all these horrible terms where if you don't pay it back, Cameron, within like 1 week, it like doubles the interest rate. The average person in this country of the United States that does payday loans is going to pay more in interest than the principal they actually borrowed.
Yeah.
We're hearing stories of people that have been on a payday lending cycle that's eating up upwards of 30 to 35% of all their discretionary money, all of it, because they're just trapped in a cycle of debt. I think that's if you want to talk about the thing that gets me crazy excited, is can we go attack that? We have ideas around building crypto based products where people can pool money together and lend to individuals on favorable interest rates and cut out this kind of predatory lending that's even becoming illegal, frankly, in many places in the world.
Mm.
And I think that's kind of like, wow, that's the kind of things that takes my breath away. If we could own all these large loans in America, wow, that's a big business in and of itself. But what if we can go and correct the payday lending travesties that are happening? And how would that happen practically? The problem today is you got to walk in with a paycheck, you got to walk in with a credit score, the interest rates are super high. What if what about a new concept of credit? This idea, and people have played with this before, of social credit. If you're willing to back me, Cameron, and I go then to a pool and I've got a friend backing me for some of the money, and I go to get the rest of the money from a pool of money built on Pigeon, that could be something that's incredibly exciting. But we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here a little bit. I mean, we first have a great product now. We're executing on growing that, and we're partnering with different organizations. We're getting the word out. We're getting the message out, and yeah, that's kind of the big goal over the next, I'd say, 5 years, is to own a big percentage of that market, and then also see if we can go downstream into smaller loans.
Fantastic. And just like kind of my own curiosity, I've kind of touched on this before. And when I first heard of Pigeon Loans, it kind of it screamed at me as a personal, like it resonated with me personally because it was something that I don't know if you were the same, but growing up, I was just, the more I earned, the more broke I was, in my early 20s working jobs. What's stopping companies like, Salesforce or KPMG or any big organization using Pigeon Loans as a service for their employees should they wish to take out a portion of their salaries at maybe a small interest rate? That's at the discretion of whoever, but is that a possibility?
It's an interesting idea. You actually bring up something that's really shocked me. We thought, I think initially with Pigeon, that all the borrowers would be people that were really low income. And it's not always the case. I can't share the person's name, but there was a woman I was talking to recently. She makes an incredibly large salary, about $250,000 a year. She had to borrow a lot of money. Why? Because she went through a divorce,
Mm.
and because of the divorce, there was some confusion around their mortgage payment. They missed two mortgage payments. And there's things people don't understand about our system. The financial systems of the world are very cold. They're cold blooded. You can miss two mortgage payments and suddenly your credit score is completely ruined from being able to get a mortgage standpoint. And she had to go borrow $60,000 from someone on very short notice. And even for someone as successful as she is, the fact that she had to go have that conversation, and frankly, the fact that she was so embarrassed to ask for the money, I think screams to the original problem. it's not just people that are struggling here. In some ways, there's people that do make good salaries. Maybe they're Salesforce employees. It's a good point, that are just in kind of a weird place temporarily.
Yeah.
Another quick example for you of someone that I found interesting was there's this guy moving to America from Latin America, and he's happy to take a lot of loans out. He's going to be able to pay them back because he already has a job in America that's very high paying, product manager job. But he's
Hmm.
got this little gap in his life where he needs to have it filled in. If you can't find friends to fill in those gaps in your life, you're going to have to go pay an exorbitant interest rate in order to get that done. So I
Yeah.
think we can actually, by normalizing this behavior, we're going to be able to help people all up and down the scope, whether they're early level executives or people that are dealing with poverty. I think the thing can be pretty universal as a useful tool.
Fantastic. Listen, the future is nothing but exciting. We like to say that the Chirp is a separate entity to Pigeon Loans, but I'm going to allow myself to be a little bit biased and say that I'm, very excited to see what happens. Pleasure talking to you as well. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about yourself or for Pigeon Loans or even Nova Club? Where can we get you?
Yeah, I have a personal website, kabenclauson.com, where I've got links to Nova and more details on Pigeon. I love one of my passions, and I love to help people who are trying to start businesses, particularly tech startups for the first time. I know how hard that can be. I had to take out loans to do it. I had to go through a lot of pain to do it. I love to help people avoid some of the pain and mistakes I made. So that's another reason people could reach out to me. Or I'm also KB Clauson on Twitter. That's another great place for us to interact.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Gabe, absolute pleasure. Having a face to face with you for the first time. Best of luck with your future at Pigeon, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
An interesting example of past experiences instilling generosity and the nature of financial assistance into a person, and that was great to see in Kaben. He knows the pressure of debt that it can have on a human being after seeing his dad have to go through hard times in 2008, and knows how helping someone with a loan is one of the greatest gifts that you can give. And there was a lot of interesting emotional aspects to Caben's stories, especially about his dad. What I latched onto the most was the aspect of shame, and I mentioned that in the interview, and how his dad's experiences taught Caben early on that debt is not a choice, it's a situation that sometimes cannot be controlled, and it has no bearing on a person's character, and it should have no stigma. And lending is such a huge part of Caben's life, as it usually is for entrepreneurs, and it was no surprise to see how Pigeon Loans got started. I loved hearing about, his mission, their mission for Pigeon Loans, and they want to be a household name. They want to normalize lending and make it a comfortable part of how we actually interact with one another, and I found that very interesting. Speaking from my own experience, getting a loan from a bank has always been incredibly difficult for me. Is my credit rating shot from the college days? I mean, probably. There's no lenience or striking off damage in that regard. And if you have a bad credit score, it can be irreparable. And to see a platform like Pigeon Loans now existing means that a financial institution doesn't have to be your only option. You can turn to a loved one, you can turn to a friend who wants to help you out. And instead of having to feel shame or be worried about, your relationship having a little rain cloud over it, Pigeon Loans can ensure that the admin side of things is taken care of, the repayments are structured and in writing, and it can turn what might be an awkward scenario into a powerful, caring gift, which I think is great. So I feel pretty positive about that interview with Caben. Kudos to him for creating a platform that is close to his heart, that is going to actually help the world. And it's nice to be a part of something that isn't just a moneymaker for you. It stems from his dad's struggles. It stems from his generosity as a friend. And it also stems from being a young entrepreneur who understands the importance and the power of a loan. And whatever can make a loan between two parties easier is always a step in the right direction for us all. So thanks again, folks, for all of your love and support. Be sure to get in touch if you have some stories of your own that you would like to share. We will be back mid-March with another episode. Until then, stay generous, stay caring, and we will see you soon. Take care.